Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show, the podcast by investors for investors.
G'day, how you going? Phil Tarrant. I'm the host of the Smart Property Investment Show, well into our 1000th, I think, episode of this particular podcast, which is a sage reminder to me how long I've been doing this and how ill-informed I still am and how I've still got a lot to learn. But having done lots of discussions over many years with property investors and people that work in and out of property, you sort of get to learn a lot. And I'm a property investor, as you all know. I invest in property. I would have probably on the larger side of a portfolio than most Australian property investors, and I'm still working at it. So we talk about some of that on the Smart Property Investment Show, so it's probably do an update at some point in time. But I'd like to bring people into the studio who have a different lens, a different view for investing in property. We all know as we enter the upcoming election cycle, the battleground is going to be fought, won and lost on housing policies or potentially taxation around it to help Australians get into property. So that's the big headline. It all comes down to how well you can access the Australian housing market, whether it's for the purpose of living in, housing affordability, and as part of that, property investors sometimes get demonised. We've spoken about that on the show beforehand, and it'll be a narrative that you'll hear over the period running up to the election and afterwards. Some people view property investors as an evil component of pushing up prices, which I think we've had some very sensible conversation around that says otherwise. Property investors in Australia are very much providing for a self-funded retirement, and that's a great asset to Australia because they're not going to be looking for handouts or support from the government in order to be retired. So we need to remember that is property investment. The best investors I know are sort of focused on building the best portfolio they can. Often they will use a buyer's agent to do that. And I speak to many property investors and many different buyer's agents on this show, as well as all the interconnected people who support buyers. But I have a buyer's agent on the show today, which I think is going to give us a different look at how things are done, purely from his experience from a former career. But then also a big cohort of our listenership, which often don't get a lot of headlines because they often like to sort of stay in the shadows. And that is a lot of people who have military veterans, male and females, who have supported Australia in the ADF, some of them for a handful of years, for some of them for their whole decades, their whole career on the front line, looking after Australia's national security. And you're surprised how many people in uniform listen to this podcast, and those people who are exiting uniform for life. Civvy Street, many of them join defence industry, and for those of you who know, we do a lot of work in that space within Momentum Media. So we have a good view and a good lens for this. And the best soldiers, sailors, airmen and women I know didn't spend all their money on jet skis and fancy cars and living the life of Larry while they're in uniform. They were putting that money into investments to provide for the future. And Kane Dury, who's a buyer's agent at Discover Buyers Agency, he's ex-military, he's a veteran, and now he does a lot of work helping those in uniform make those smarter decisions while they're in uniform, and a lot of benefits around that. We can have a chat about that, but then also life after uniform and how to be a smart investor, particularly leveraging property. Kane, welcome to the show, mate.
Thanks for having us, Phil. Excited to be here.
Now, should I be worried? You're ex-military. I'm always a bit sort of nervous and concerned around ex-military type of things. You never know what they're going to do, and they're steady set of hands, and don't offend you too much, right? Snap.
No.
None of that sort of stuff.
I think you're safe with me.
No.
I've been out a while now, Phil, so...
Yeah, tell us about it. So what sort of work were you doing in the military?
Yeah, so I was 18, no real idea what I was going to do with myself. Suggested to Mum one day, might join the army.
Yeah.
And I think before I finished the sentence, she had packed my bag and off I went. And as I prepared, everyone sort of said to me, you may as well get a trade. So enlisted in Ramey and got my diesel mechanic certificate.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
So you don't want to look at an engine ever again? Or you're still quite handy?
No, I wouldn't know what end of the spanner to hold, to be honest, Phil.
Yeah. So how long did you serve for?
I did 12 years.
Okay.
Moved from South Australia to Victoria to Townsville, Sydney, Townsville and Perth.
Okay, so you've been around a bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. So I've seen a fair bit of Australia.
Yeah. And your experience in the military, good one?
Brilliant. Yeah, loved it. I met so many good people and did so many different things. I wouldn't change it, but come a time to discharge when we were having family and family come first. So we settled down on the Gold Coast.
There you go. And that's an issue that faces the military today, the ADF, particularly when we're trying to grow our numbers, is that people get to a particular point and they go, okay, I've got to have other priorities now, and maybe the military doesn't fit into it. But I know the different chiefs are doing a lot of work to try and keep people in uniform, because it's at that sort of 12-year mark where they go, they're the sort of people we don't want to be losing, right?
Yeah, that's right. And it is a unique lifestyle, a very diverse and fun and adventurous life, but you also have to give up a lot, I guess, when you do it, and that's sticking those roots in to where you want to call home.
So why the Gold Coast? Why'd you end up there?
Because my parents-in-law didn't live there.
Okay.
That was a big factor. Good chance they're not listening, so that's okay.
You never know.
Yeah. But it's a brilliant place for family.
Yeah.
Wife, kids, we love it there. So, yeah, where else would you choose?
It's a nice part of the world. I was up there for that big ARIC conference recently. I saw you there, bumped into you up there. And I can sort of get the appeal. It's quite a nice sort of chilled, different pace of life than maybe what you get in Sydney, and the sun's always shining, it seems. So I get it. And intrastate migration, particularly from COVID and subsequent to a lot of people have moved up that way. It's a booming part of the Australian economy, southeast Queensland, and long will it be. But so what did you do when you got straight out of uniform? What happened?
Yeah, so when we were actually posted to Sydney in 2009, 10, 11, and here in North Sydney actually was one of these buildings very close by. I did my course as a mortgage broker.
Okay.
And then pretty much...
Was that down by the train station?
Yes.
Was that with Doug Daniels? Or would be.
I wouldn't remember the name, but yeah.
He does all the training.
Yeah. So it was a while back now. And then, so day one on the Gold Coast, never lived there, never been in the industry, but obviously had my portfolio and a fair bit of sort of background knowledge there. I just went and pounded the pavement as a broker and started my own business.
How'd you find mortgage broking?
Yeah, pretty good, but to be honest, the redhead in me didn't have the patience to deal with the banks, if I'm honest. But I loved 80% of the role.
Yeah.
But probably dealing with the banks was a bit tedious. And I guess I got into it from my own portfolio and interest in property, but I found I did a lot of first-home buyers or refinancing to save in the monthly budget, and I didn't get that property conversation that I enjoyed so much, and that's sort of what sparked the change to buyer's agency.
So while you're in the military, you started investing in property?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
See, did many of your mates do that?
A few did, yeah. Yep. Plenty did. I had one friend... He purchased 3 properties in the very early stages of his career. His dad had a significant portfolio and encouraged him to do it. And he had mixed results. Buyer's agents, this is 2006, 7, buyer's agents weren't much of a thing back then. There was still the property groups or the marketers around, but not so many buyer's agents. So he had mixed results, but he was one that comes to mind. And a lot of people become somewhat accidental investors where they might be posted to Sydney, they'll buy a property there, then post away, and they'll just retain it as a portfolio, and they sort of build their portfolio, so to speak, from their posting cycle.
Yeah, which I'm sure for some people has worked out, but this gentleman you're speaking of, he's done the right thing, and that is spending his money to invest in property, but it sounds like he's bought the wrong type of property.
Yeah.
So, did he get it wrong because of the advice he received, or is that just he made the calls himself?
Well, there was no advice at all. So he just his dad was like, you've got to get into property. And back then the mantra was property doubles every 7 to 10 years. So just stack them and sit and wait. But the 3 that he purchased didn't grow in value for about 12 years because it was just bad timing on the market. And that's that throwing the dart at the dartboard when you're making the mistake of, I live in North Sydney, so I'm going to buy in North Sydney, or wherever I live, I'll buy the investment because I've got to see it and touch it.
So what was the catalyst for you then to start investing in property when you were still in uniform? Was it, an aha moment, or was it just one of those things that happened? How far through your sort of military career before you started investing? Yeah,
so I was 22. I just finished the apprenticeship. And like many, I read the Rich Dad books, I read the Steve McKnight books, and just become a bit of a sponge for information. And pretty much paid out a motorbike loan one week and went and purchased a property the next week using the first home owners grant and a Defence Force grant that you could get, which formed enough of a deposit. And pretty much same as my friend that I mentioned, just ran out and purchased a property in an area that I lived with not a lot of research. And,
Where was that?
Townsville.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you still got the property?
Yeah, so it's a bit of so it's in profit now. It's doing quite well now, as we all know. Townsville's a good market at the moment, but it's a bit of a white elephant, that one, and it sort of highlights the importance of due diligence when picking a property. If you remember the Australia Day floods in 2019, so this one property we purchased in 2005, paid $170,000, and 15 years odd later, still worth roughly that. And then the Australia Day floods hit, and our tenant got evacuated in the middle of the night by a tinny, and off they went. And then the property sat vacant for 6 months because the body corporate was the insurer. And it ended up after 6 months, they declined the claim on stormwater, not floodwater. And we were living here on the coast at the time, so all of a sudden we had to do a full renovation on this unit in Townsville. As you imagine, moisture and mould become a thing after 6 months. So it was pretty stressful at the time, and kind of really hits home on how important the due diligence process is when selecting a property, which a lot of people do tend to pay off. So, yeah, we learnt firsthand.
Yeah, and again, the right intent, maybe the wrong execution, right? Yep. You've gone, well, I'll invest in property and start creating wealth, but not necessarily the right property. It sounds like I got a bit unlucky there as well, but to park all that money for that period of time without any growth is the biggest issue, right? Like, it's a missed opportunity cost that you could have had that same money probably deployed in the western suburbs of Sydney and doubled it.
That's right, doubled or tripled in that same period of time, yeah. So the opportunity cost is huge, and you can't replace that experience of learning from it. But as long as you evolve and you learn from it and you improve, you can still continue to build a portfolio.
Yeah. And you still got the property now?
I think purely from a story point of view, and I just won't sell it. It's got almost no debt on it now. Like, happy days. And it's an emotional thing now.
Yeah, and property's going up. It's doing quite well, that part of the world. So it didn't burn you, though?
No, we continued to purchase.
So you were posted in Townsville at that point in time when you bought it?
Yeah, okay. So I used the first home owners grant, the government one. That was the old $7,000 one.
Yeah.
And then there was a defence HPAS, which was $15,000 taxed.
So people that in the military get a lot of incentives, right? There's incentives around where you're posted and whether it's away from home or it's at your home. There's overseas posting, all this sort of stuff. There's a really good way to manufacture money, but there's also all these other incentives. You get cheaper loans by memory?
So you got the Joe House loan where you get essentially, like, there's different tiers and levels and stuff, but to simplify it, it's about 1/3 of the interest depending on how many years you've served and what tier you qualify for.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as long as you're in uniform, you can get as many of them as you want?
No, just the one.
You get one.
Yeah. But, in a perfect scenario, you might get it on, and you've got to live in it. So it's a home scheme, not an investment scheme. But then once you've got it on that property and you post away, you can retain the benefit of that loan for that property, and in your new locality, rent assistance, buy a property, whatever you like.
So when you're sort of all sitting around and tinkering with diesel engines and doing what soldiers do, how much of the conversation was actually around, hey, how do we make money? How do we who's doing what's working? How much of that versus just not talking about that sort of stuff?
Yeah, very little.
Yeah.
I was almost an outcast. I remember I would get the Australian Property Investor magazine every month. I knew what day it would come out and I'd read it cover to cover, but no one else was interested or would read it. A lot of it was, cars. It was partying and,
all the usual stuff.
Yeah.
And it's the point, I think people, whether it's in the military or otherwise, people are inherently attracted to property. I think they see it, something takes their attention, and then they immerse and absorb themselves in it. So it's good to see that you've done that and you've now made it a career. So who would have known back then when you were sort of a diesel mechanic that you ended up being a buyer's agent or mortgage broker and then buyer's agent. Welcome back, Phil Tarrant. Having a chat with Kane Dury. He's a buyer's agent over at Discover Buyers Agency. So, Kane, so you bought one property there in Townsville, your first property. So while you're in uniform, what sort of portfolio did you accumulate?
While we were in, we accumulated to about 5.
Yep.
And then once I become a broker, we purchased another 3.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and when you become so you left service and then become a mortgage broker, pretty much you did the course and become a broker instantaneously.
Yeah, just no one was going to employ me as a mortgage broker, being ex-defence with no experience. So I just jumped in the deep end. In the mortgage broking industry, you obviously got to get mentored for the first 2 years.
Yep.
So found an aggregator, signed up, got a mentor, and away I went.
Yeah. And how long were you a mortgage broker for?
6 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the first
all
bit,
on the Gold Coast.
Okay. So you probably couldn't have bought any property for the first year or so because
Yeah,
you've got to
right.
wait till you get a couple of tax returns in.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you could borrow money again, you were at it.
Yeah, I think there was one in the first couple of years after we discharged. That was in the super fund, and the contributions, as my wife was a nurse, was enough to get the finance through, and yeah, so still found a way to keep going.
Yeah, there's always a way. And what did you buy? So what sort of properties did you buy after that first one in Townsville while you're still in uniform?
I bought a townhouse in South Australia,
Yep.
and then after that it was all houses with land content. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
In different areas, different locations.
yeah. We had one in Albury-Wodonga, South Australia, Toowoomba, a couple in Townsville, and then the Gold Coast.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, and then as a mortgage broker, you just kept buying similar sort of properties to that, did you? Yeah. And are you happy with the portfolio where it's at and how it's performing?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Keen to move into commercial next. So we'll concentrate on the business at the moment and accelerating that. It's got my full attention, and then commercial will be the next phase for our portfolio.
Which is a pretty typical journey for most people who sort of build a property portfolio. They get it to a point where they just go, okay, well, I'd like to make it a bit more black than red. If you've got a big residential portfolio, particularly if it's depending where it's geared on the LVR level with interest rates where they are, it's a nice way to offset and balance a portfolio with commercial.
And manage one commercial tenant rather than for the same value of 5 residential tenants. I guess. Yeah.
Did you get fatigued sort of managing your portfolio because it requires a lot of work, or is yours pretty self-sufficient?
Yeah, it's all just admin that gets lobbed into the business, I guess. So you get used to it, but when you have a townhouse in Townsville that floods and that, it takes a fair bit of time and effort and stress levels.
So mortgage broker for 4 years?
6.
6 years.
Yep.
Okay. And did you don't do any mortgage broking anymore? That's completely done.
No, so I guess the last year was almost part-time. I had a foot out the door and was looking into the buyer's agency space.
Yeah.
And started to slow things down. And then after about a year as a buyer's agent, I sold the mortgage book.
Okay. And was there a point when you were a mortgage broker where you went, that buyer's agent art looks pretty good, I'm going to prepare to transition out of broking and becoming a mortgage broker? What was the inflection point for you?
Yeah, probably. I remember I had this loan appointment and I went to see this client. They had their home, they had a decent amount of equity, and they were talking about just a finance review. Is our interest rate competitive? And we started speaking about buying investment property, and we probably spoke for about 2 hours, and I just poured a fair bit of knowledge out and just really enjoyed the conversation, and they got a lot out of it. I remember walking back to the car, and might have been a refinance of the home and the debt for the new purchase of the investment property. So, $1 million worth of debt in one client. So it was a pretty good deal for a mortgage broker. But I remember going back to the car and and I was like, I lost the excitement once the property conversation finished.
Yeah.
And that was the point that I started being a bit more active in looking to transition from the mortgage broker space to buyer's agency.
And how did you start that transition? Was it an education thing? Was it a upskilling thing?
There was a little bit of upskilling. Like I already had my real estate certificate, and obviously had a very good concept of debt and accessing debt and financing the purchase and structuring, and my personal portfolio. But I approached a couple of buyers agents, just got their thoughts and advice, and then ended up joining another buyers agency for the first 2 years before we then started our own buyers agency.
So good apprenticeship. You probably learned a lot in those first couple of years.
Yeah, first couple of years were very good. Probably 250 odd purchases in 2 years.
Wow.
Was REB Awards finalist.
I saw that.
Yeah, so very good apprenticeship. A lot of experience crammed into the 2 years, just doing volume.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So there's nothing really inside of a real estate deal for a property investment you haven't seen now.
Well, I think a lot of people attest to you've never seen it all. But yeah, a lot of experience and deals crammed into 2 years, that's for sure.
Yeah, and sort of the volume of deals did like mortgage broking. You do a couple of deals, and then it's the process and paperwork and speaking to lenders and stuff. Having done so many real estate deals, do you still get as excited about them today as what you did on your first couple of deals?
Yeah, more. I love the real estate and I love that, giving the client that light bulb moment of, you don't need to buy your home paid off over 30 years. And if you're lucky enough to buy, maybe one or two, you can there's another way to do it. So I love that light bulb moment it creates for first-time investors. So it still excites me, and I think it always will to an extent.
Yeah, that's cool. And it doesn't matter the size of the deal, it's just the outcome for the client maybe.
Definitely. I think even sometimes the smaller ones can be more exciting, depend on, everyone's got their story to tell and their journey. So one person buying 2 investments could be a far bigger achievement than, another person buying 10, because we don't know the story behind the curtain of that person. So yeah, that's why I love property, because, everyone's got their background, but everyone's got an opportunity to create a portfolio if they take the time and effort to learn and get educated.
So you just don't do buyers agency work for people who are military or ex-military. You do both.
Yes, we do everyone.
Yeah.
Anyone looking to build and scale a portfolio and wants that advice or their unique situation. But we just sort of love servicing the ex-offence or the defence community.
Yeah, and it's good that you can continue to sort of give back to that community, because often you don't know what you don't know, and sort of have you spend a lot of time with people in uniform and out of uniform. Sometimes, whose responsibility is it to give them the education they need to create wealth through property? It doesn't happen inside the services. So,
no, that's right.
They do a lot of training, a lot of preparation, but it's not for the purpose of being a property investor. It's for the purpose of security. So it's good that you're putting energy and effort into supporting this cohort of people, because they're at an interesting point. There's a lot of sacrifice people inside the military to do the work that they do in uniform, but there's a lot of upside benefits in terms of some of the incentives they have to support them in home ownership, and also the ability to make money. And you're typically fed by someone else while you're at work, right? It's you can actually, if you're focused, you can save money quite effectively while you're in the military.
You can, and there's lots of benefits and perks to being a defence member. But it's about getting educated on what they are and how to use them best for your posting cycle and your situation, to make sure that you do use them, because once you're discharged, they're generally gone.
Yeah, and people, they play the game really well, right? If you're in the know and you've got a good network of actually understanding how it all works, it's going to be frustrating as well. It doesn't happen easily, right?
It's a game, isn't it? Yeah. So you got to play the game. It's the same as Monopoly, right? You can play it well and not so well. So while you're in defence, you're not going to be in there forever. So maximise, what you can do with what you've got.
Yeah, and make hay while the sun is shining, right? It's a good time to start investing. So tell me about Discover Buyers Agencies. Where the name come from? Was it just a thing that popped in your head?
Yeah, pretty much. There was I like the name and we love our brand, but there was no real love story behind it. So
just pretty much the name is on the tin. You discover stuff for
discover property, discover your journey, discover,
And the company is based in the Gold Coast, but you buy right across Australia. Give me a sense for what you do. So you'll do owner-occupied stuff inside the Gold Coast, but you'll do property investment stuff Australia-wide.
Yeah, so when it's an investor, like a traditional real estate sales agency would be geographically based in a suburb and they'll sell there. So many buyers agents are similar to that. And then you've got your investment buyers agent that will buy Australia-wide. So we'll buy Australia-wide, licensed in all states, and we use research to identify where we think is a good market for growth for their portfolio, but also homeowners on the Gold Coast, and specifically people relocating from, mainly the Melbourne and Sydney, but also, Perth, Adelaide to the Gold Coast as home buyers.
Yeah, and no preference over home buyer stuff versus property investment stuff? A very different brief and a very different outcome.
Yeah, very different brief. So my wife, who was a nurse for 20 years, works in the business as well, and she's great at all the homeowner and the interior design side of things. So she'll take the brief for the homeowners, but I love the investors and working with the investors and helping them sort of build their portfolio. It's
such a different proposition, right? Like as a property investor, it all comes down to the numbers and the upsides, whereas buying a home to live in, it's like, well, how are we going to live here? Has it got this? I like that. I don't like that. It's a very, very, very different set of skill sets you need. Yeah,
and I guess as a mortgage broker, I sat in many lounge rooms where, people's main retirement goal was retirement plan was to just downsize the family home. And they hadn't really given any thought or hadn't been educated on property investment. So every homeowner that we buy for locally on the Gold Coast, we want to transition that conversation to, have you considered building a portfolio, and open up the doors to buying interstate and making that, a seamless process. So they've brought their home, but how are we going to pay it off faster and build a bit of wealth?
So the key objectives for you guys within Discover Buyers Agencies to service both those markets as effectively each other, but on the investment side, well, even on the owner-occupied stuff, with a lens towards supporting the ADF family as well, which
Correct,
you've got some pretty interesting insights around.
Yeah, we've got some plans, and I would love to build the business to a point where we can employ a few vets and help other people give back to that community and help them get their career once they've discharged, if they're interested in becoming a buyer's agency or a mortgage broker.
Is it a big enough market, do you think, to service transitioning ADF members and veterans?
We're not going to transition them all, but for the right cultural fit and the right people that want to, there's definitely the market there to be serviced, and yeah.
So on the sort of buyer's agency side for people on posting cycles, you'll help people find new places to buy in new locations as they navigate their career through the military.
Yeah, correct. And we can even service, even if they're going to buy, say they've posted to Perth, we can even help them buy an own-occupier over in Perth if they're posting from, say, Brisbane. So, as you know, the physical inspection of a property is only a small part of the value proposition of a buyer's agency. And there's lots of different campaigns that agents run, different market conditions, whether it's hot or cold, listing price, and how do I navigate that whole purchase, especially when you're moving into states. We can service on a national level wherever you're moving from and to.
I don't know what your views are on this. Are military people more trusting of other military people than non-military people? And what I'm getting at there is, are they inherently sort of question people's recommendations, particularly around property and property investments, or they're pretty accepting of good advice, they'll take it?
Yeah, I think there's an element of rapport there. So there's that element of trust, but trust has to be earned as well. So as long as you can articulate value and educate someone on what you offer, you can build the trust there. But there's a foundation of a common theme of the military that helps. Yeah,
and are you going to be back in uniform and a reservist so you can find more clients, do you think? Have you thought about this? Or how are you going to connect with the ADF community?
I think once you're in the ADF community, you never really disconnect, even though you might discharge. So there's lots of community groups. Like I go to a place on the Gold Coast called Veterans Grappling. It's actually a foundation, and it's free for Defence Force as well as first responders, police and fireys, and it's a jiu-jitsu gym and that. So there's a community there. So you generally find your communities, once you're out. Yeah.
Yeah, and most people are all looking to get ahead, right? And to my earlier point, I don't know the numbers of ADF and veterans who tune in this podcast, but when I get out and about and do stuff, you'd be surprised how many of them actually tune into it. So maybe it's my voice sort of in the background on a podcast when people are out there sort of, tinkering in a diesel machine somewhere, rather than the latest pop songs Welcome back, Phil Tarrant, chatting with Discover Buyers Agents. He's Kane Dury, he's a buyer's agent there. So the moment you registered what was your first day? Tell me about your first day in Discover Buyers Agency. What did you do? You registered the business, and then what happened?
Well, we had a few clients, and we had as a mortgage broker, buyer's agent, any self-employed business, you have your pipeline of clients and that. So we did have a couple of clients there that we were servicing from day one, and away we went. And then it's just from there, just building the business.
And what are you seeing in the market right now? Is it good time to buy? Obviously, a buyer's agent is always a good time to buy, but what are you seeing?
Yeah, we're seeing like very low stock levels and very high competition in buying, and a lot of confusion with a listing and what it's actually worth and how to value it. So, interesting times.
That's the challenge, right? It's difference between, I know you've got views on this, difference between money, currency, price and value, and largely you want your buyer's agent to get those things right. Pretty important.
Well, so the foundation of the education piece, I guess. So, currency is our dollars in the bank. It's not money. Money has 5,000 years worth of history, and money has certain characteristics, store of value, medium of exchange, and I guess currency doesn't have the store of value that say gold would have. If we look at the 1970, the median house price in Australia, and all the stat nerds out there might go reference check this, but average house price might have been $12,000. A kilo of gold was $2,000. So if we had 6 kilos, there's $12,000, and then we put $12,000, and we put all three on the table here: $12,000 worth of cash, 6 kilos of gold being $12,000, and the title to the property because it won't fit. If you fast forward to 2024 and we look at, I think in April, CoreLogic's median house price for Australia wide was $779. A kilo of gold is about $112,000. So 6 of those is about $670. It's not quite at the same pace as property. And then $12,000 worth of cash is still sitting there. So the cash or the fiat currency has no store of value proposition like property. So then the game turns into how many properties can I get by accessing lending of that and pay that debt off with tomorrow's dollar that will earn further down the track when it deteriorates in value.
You thought about this?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So a part of when I left the defence in my last year or so, I worked at a gold bullion exchange in Brisbane.
Okay.
And that was just sort of filling the void as I got into the buyer's agency, but it was only sort of part-time.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So you've seen chunks of gold sitting there, all racked up in a safe?
Yeah, so there was plenty. There was people walk in with $250,000 of cash and walk out with a handful of gold and vice versa. So very interesting.
Many people walking around with gold in their pockets.
Probably not walking the streets,
yeah.
but there'd be more investors or more buyers of gold than you might suspect, I guess.
Yeah, it's quite a portable currency, right? It's hard to pick up a house and move it, whereas gold you can shift it.
But there's no leverage to it.
No.
So it's limited in its capacity. But if you're, and that's why I guess property makes such a good asset class to build a portfolio.
So how far through the Discover Buyers Agent journey are you now? How many years in?
Coming up to 12 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's still pretty new.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how's it been? Are you happy with the first 12 months?
Yeah, very happy. Exciting times ahead, lots of plans. It's a great business to be in.
Yeah. And it seems to be more buyers agents popping up on the Gold Coast, popping
up on the Gold Coast, same as Sydney, Melbourne and everywhere, I guess.
Isn't it? Yeah.
But it's all what value can you add, what experience can you draw on, and what's your resume look like. So
yeah, well, you've got a large portfolio. You've got all those years as a mortgage broker, which is property investment is a game of finance, right? So
that's right.
If with that view and lens around borrowing, you don't necessarily want to do the mortgages, but with a view towards the strategies around accessing finance as a mortgage broker, that's a huge enabler.
It is, and you need to have a mortgage broker that's got a common interest, that's looking to build their own portfolio, so they're speaking the same language. Because ultimately, if you can't access debt, you can't add the next property to the portfolio.
Yeah. Well, mate, I've enjoyed catching up, Kane. all very brief, but already sort of 40 minutes in. That's flown by. So what's next, mate? You just got to keep plugging away, keep at it, sort of tap into this veteran ADF community while, simultaneously servicing civilians.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're growing fast, so it's a great journey to be on. Want to keep servicing that military community, like you say, and grow the team. And if the right person pops up, we'd love to have that conversation if they're looking to join, to discharge and join or become a buyer's agent or a broker. Lots of exciting times.
Nice. Well, that's Kane. So how do people find out about you guys that want sort of more info?
Yeah, so you can just go to discoverbuyersagency.com.au or Kane at discoverbuyersagency.com.au.
Track it down. Yeah.
That's it. We're all over socials as well under the same name.
Okay. You happy to have a chat? Anyone,
just reach out, email or jump on the website, submit the form and you can book straight into the calendar as well.
I jumped on your website before we got on air and you look pretty straightforward. So go and check these guys out, discoverbuyersagency.com.au and whether or not you're in the military or currently serving or a veteran or outside of that cohort of people, the point is that if you want to make the right decision around property investment, you've got to surround yourself with the right people. So that's what I see smart investors do. They challenge, they press, they find the right people for them as well. And sometimes you got to try a few times before you find the right people who are part of your investing journey, whether you're an accountant or a mortgage broker or a buyer's agent or anyone else. So thanks for coming in, mate. It's
Thanks
good to see you.
Phil.
You're down here in Sydney for the week, are you? Catching up with a whole bunch of clients and co?
Yeah, a couple of clients, a couple of friends, a couple of brokers and plans.
So you won't be drinking any while you're down here in Sydney. There's no catch-ups happening.
Not at all, Phil.
No, not at all. That's Kane Dury, a buyer's agent over at Discover Buyer's Agent. Go and check these guys out. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Remember to check out smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. We'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.